talk with two very important people in Proctor's history, Bob Warlock and Mardy Moore, and I'm sure you can tell them apart. I'm Karen Johnson.
Hopefully.
We're talking about the history of Proctor's. Today is August 5th, 2013, and we're going to try and see what we can learn about how Proctor's got started and all the things that happened. So Mardy, you moved here in the 30s?
I moved here in 51.
51.
And got involved with Proctor's. I was on the Chamber of Commerce committee, which had the Arts Council as part of its operation. And so I was on the Arts Council and was very active with various art groups when Proctor's was being formed.
So what's your first memory of Proctor's?
My first memory, oh gee,
As far as the new Proctor's.
Yes, yeah, I know what you meant by that. I'm trying to think. I remember going to meetings of the Arts Council where we discussed it, and we put together a board. I met with Kay Rosendahl. We met in Bob Cohen's office, and we had both come prepared with a list of people that we thought would be interested in helping to rejuvenate Proctor's. And Mel Mintz, who was also one of the incorporators, gave us his list, and Kay and I divided the list up, and we called various people, and so that's probably my first real opening with Proctor's. It was a wonderful situation because everybody that we asked joined. Nobody said no. I couldn't believe it. It was just a wonderful thing. I think everybody was so afraid that we were going to lose Proctor's Theater. So many other wonderful buildings had been lost. And I think they felt urgency. And once we started talking about it and we started having meetings, people became very possessive of the idea of Proctor's rejuvenating. And they felt it was their theater, especially in this area. Now we've done so many things and the theater is so fantastic that I think the whole region feels possessive. But at that point, when we were just starting, it was Schenectady and the environs that really felt they owned the theater. It was theirs. And one of the reasons that I think they felt that way was when we first got together and started talking about starting Proctor's, we tried to talk to the various art groups. We sent them a survey. I was great at sending surveys. I like to pick people's brains. So I sent a survey to all these arts groups, and they all came and they told us what they'd like to see at Proctor's, what they didn't want to see, and they emphasized what I think is still the policy here, that local groups are treated much more favorably than touring shows. Touring shows are professional operations and they can pay a bigger freight, but the local groups are mostly volunteers and they just really needed to have that support. And I think that that was one of the strengths of Proctor's, was that there were several in-house groups when we first started. And of course, once we got together and decided we were going to go ahead, we had to have something for people to come and see. So we started talking about the demonstration season that we were going to have to show that this was a viable operation and it was something that people would support. And so we sat down and talked about what we would have. And I found a wonderful woman. Her name was Edith Dapper, and she lived over in Delmar, and she was a retired theater agent. And so she was so helpful. She opened doors for me. She'd say, here's this person's name, here's their private telephone number, call them, tell them I told you to call. And it was a key to us getting into all these places and getting a very attractive price. She said, tell them right up front that you're very poor. Oh, I said, I can beg. Don't worry about that. I will get everything free that I can. And so when we talked to various agents, the one that I wanted to open the season with, some of the board people thought I was crazy because I wanted to open it with Blackstone's Magic Show. But I thought it set a proper tone for the theater because it was magic that it was going to start. And it was going to be magic for years to come. So why not start with Blackstone and have it be a magic show? So we booked it. And it was really funny because their advance agent came up. His name was Dick Fishbein, I think. I may have that wrong. But anyway, he came up to look at the theater, and he almost threw up his hands in despair. He said, well, I don't think you're going to be ready. I said, don't give up the date. We're going to be ready. We will be ready. We will open in January as advertised. Well, he said, you don't have enough stage weights. I said, don't worry about it, we'll get stage weights. What else do we need? And the thing that concerned me the most was knowing that Blackstone had an elephant in his troupe. I thought if the elephant falls through the stage and goes with a crash into the basement, that might end the show. So I didn't want that kind of a showstopper. So he said, no, you don't need to worry. If an elephant steps on a surface, it knows the surface is safe. So if the elephant walks on the stage, its stage will hold it. I thought that was an interesting piece of trivia. I've not run into any other elephants to use it, but I'm trying. But anyway, the show was booked and it was a sellout. It was absolutely fantastic. People were just so anxious to come. And of course, the prices were extremely attractive. 6, 8, and 10, I think, were the prices, or maybe 4, 8, and 10. Anyway, they were very reasonable. And we sold out, and the fire department said you can have 50 people standing. We sold all the standing that we had, and we opened. It's a wonderful show. Everybody tells me it was a wonderful show. I barely saw it. As the theater opened and people came in, and of course everybody had to go to the bathroom, everybody had to get a drink of water, it was very hard on the old plumbing. And the old plumbing didn't like it, and it gradually gave out. First, one stall in the ladies' room stopped working. So I got a sign, put it on out of order, taped it over, fixed the flow that was on the floor, made a arrangement for that, and thought, oh, well, that's not bad. That's only one bathroom. We can still. It was a beginning of a deluge. The next toilet went, the next one, the next one. Pretty soon, the men's room was falling apart. Then the drinking fountains. There was not a drop of, I don't know what about backstage, but in the front of the house, there was not a drop of water. And pretty soon, there was not only not a drop to be had, but it started running down the aisle. And so we quick got all the mops we could get a hold of, and I got a crew of people, and we all mopped and mopped and mopped, and it was just ridiculously wild. But there was an interesting incident that I feel is worthy of talking about. Several of the businessmen who had shops right around Proctors gave me the keys to their business and said, if somebody needs to use the bathroom, you could take them to my store. Now, how many people would do that in this day and age? But people just wanted it to be such a success. They didn't want anything to happen or to mar it. And fortunately, we were able to stop the flood before it got to people's feet. So I consider that a big success.
Well, you must have, because I was sitting, maybe in about the 10th row, and I didn't know any of this was going on.
Oh, if you had looked back, just glanced back, you would have seen frantic people with paper towels, mops, everything that we could get. But anyway, the show went on. It was lovely. We borrowed stage weights from every school in the area. I tried to put initials on them, like N for Niskuna, S for Scotia Glenville, G for Guilderland, so that we could tell where we got the stage weights. But anyway, it was a big success.
And that was
Excuse me, is there a microphone loose?
No, it's there.
It's right here. You don't hear it?
Oh no, the microphone did come out.
I still have the hook.
The hook is there, but the
the little mic is off.
Here it
We're
is,
gonna
right
have to-
here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
You missed all that wonderful
No,
story.
no, we got it all. We got it all.
Okay,
It's just
yeah, yeah.
I
See, I
couldn't
talk too loud.
hear static.
That's where it's supposed to be now? I'll try not to move my hands. The trouble is I talk with my hands.
Why don't we put this under your arm? Maybe that'll make a difference.
Very clever,
Okay.
very clever.
Is the sound good?
We got the sound is perfect.
Okay, and then at the end, so we'll just start back up?
Just start right back up.
I can't remember what I was talking about.
Marty, I think it's important just to give some context when you talked about this group getting together. There were two things going on. One was the redevelopment of this block and a
Yes.
whole bunch of people who wanted to do a retail redevelopment. And at the same time, the person who owned the theater had stopped paying his taxes.
Right.
And the city was going to be taking it over. So in that context, there was a real opportunity for another group to take control of the
Oh,
theater.
absolutely. It was a golden opportunity.
And
we
that's where
snatched it.
you and Melvin Mintz and Bob
Dave
Cohen
Roosevelt.
did free legal work and
Yes,
also
he
was
did.
an incorporator. His firm donated that because they were part of the
They
other
were part of
group.
the other group, right, and
And
they
it
could
all
see the
came
benefit.
together.
it was wonderful. It was one of those things that things happened at the opportune moment. And having the redevelopment of the businesses in the area was a real boost for the theater. There were a few little things that became problematic when they put bridges coming into the arcade and into the theater. It caused a consternation because it was so hard to have load-ins. But it was a time when everybody wanted this to succeed. Everybody was enthusiastic, energetic about it, and the businesses could see that having a live theater with all of the attraction of people coming to it would be good for their business.
Mhm.
And conversely, we felt there were people who would buy tickets who were customers of all those businesses.
So this was 1979,
Yes.
and you had the season, and a couple years later, Bob arrived on the scene.
Right.
And what were you?
Well, I was living in Argyle at the time, and I could see on the television the promotions for Proctors, and Dennis was very instrumental in that. And they're talking about how this wonderful theater is being restored and brought back and active. And so my background had been in theater, and I had worked at Carnegie Hall, so I thought, well, this might be a job opportunity, and I applied. And I was hired as a part-time, temporary summer worker, and that was in 1981, and I'm still here, so part-time temporary is pretty good.
It was perfect.
So
He
the
brought
Dennis
someone-
you spoke about was Dennis Madden, who
Dennis
was
Madden,
the
mhm.
first paid
He
executive.
was Marianne Lomel was the first executive, but she was a volunteer. We might have paid her a pittance.
Not much, because you didn't have much.
Well, we didn't have much. I can remember thinking, well, there's no point in putting in a bill for postage because nobody's going to give me any money for it, so I might as well donate it. And I think we all had that kind of an attitude. There was no money, but there was a lot of enthusiasm.
So when Bob came, did things change, having a few
Well,
professional?
I think he brought a wonderful degree of professionalism. And I think we were sort of bumbling along in our little volunteer way. And because of his experience, he was able to, did wonders with the film series. We were having films and fairly successful, but Bob really brought them to made a plan and had ones that would fit together and make like a film series. It was really great. And
So
of course, the
did you
shop.
do the films from the beginning?
No. Someone else started doing the films. There were like 6 films during the summer time, and then we started doing films more frequently and throughout the year whenever we could, because there were a lot of dark days. So rather than have an empty theater, we thought films
film.
would work because it was a low-cost expense, and we had the projector, and
Yep.
and we started building an audience.
Was the projector in the building, or did you have to go out and buy one?
Oh no, it was here.
No,
It was here.
it was-
As a matter of fact, when we were cleaning to get ready for the opening, the projection booth was one of the projects that I was involved with, along with a gentleman from GE. I can't think of his name, but he came every night after work and put on his old clothes and would go in. Everything was covered with carbon. You couldn't touch anything in that room.
That's because they were the old side-by-side carbon arc projectors
No.
that
Right.
needed to be operated.
And they had the films laid, how did they work?
Well, the films were on individual reels, and you would get 4, 5, 6 reels for a film, and then they'd have to be put onto a different reel, or wound onto a reel, and then set up in the projector, and it would run from the top to the bottom, and you'd have to make sure that you watch the carbon arc. You've seen flickering. That's why they were called the flickers before. Because the carbon arc would start to wear out or want to go out. It's like a candle, a flickering light. So you'd have to watch that. It was a constant project.
So do you know how to run those projectors?
I had done it before, yes.
We had projectionists. There were a couple of young men who were the projectionists here at Proctors, and they, after they left Proctors, they went over and ran the Scotia Theatre.
Yeah. Marshall Legier, I think, was doing that too.
Yes,
So.
yes, he was.
So what was your main job? I mean, what were your duties?
Well, when I was first hired, I was in the box office. I was a clerk in the box office selling tickets. I remember when we had Annie the first time, the line went from the box office out the door and around the corner because we were selling hard tickets before computers. That's how long ago it was.
How'd you keep them straight? I mean, describe the physical thing about what you did to sell tickets.
Well, the tickets were in the drawer. They were bundled in sections, and you would take tickets out and show it to a customer. And if they weren't happy with that, you would take out another bundle and try and get them seats that they would be happy with. And so it was constantly taking tickets out and putting tickets back. And they were the actual physical ticket. It wasn't on a map in a computer that
We did have
do
a
nowadays.
seating chart that you
Seating
X'd
chart,
out,
yeah.
and that's how we did it the first several years, even before you came. You had hard tickets.
So you could show a patron what was left.
You could show them the map with all the X's off, and they'd say, these seats are available, which you'd like. You know, when Annie came, that almost gave me a heart attack. Annie, we had to pay, was it $240,000? That number sort of sticks in my head. Before they would start, they had to have, before the second act curtain would go up, they had to have all their money paid. And it was a 2-day run or a 3-day run or something?
I don't remember now, but it was several days.
it was a
one
few
of the
days.
longest that we had at that
Yes,
point.
and that was
It could
another
have been a
big
week.
change, to have more than one performance. So keeping track of performance tickets for which day they're for and which time they're for was another big thrill for people like Bob, who did it very well. I didn't touch that. I could have mixed that right up.
So
But-
you
but it
didn't have a heart
started.
attack, and Annie was a big success.
It was a huge success, but we had booked it and had to spend so much money before we knew whether it was going to be a success or not. You know, that was,
So how did you come up with all that cash in those days?
well, what we did was, as we got money, we'd put it into the bank, and then Bob Grabner, who was the treasurer, would write a check. And as a matter of fact, that was another funny thing about Blackstone. Bob Grabner forgot to give him the check, and he's sitting in the theater, and somebody came rushing out to him to give Blackstone the check so that they would start.
Oh, no checking, no show.
No checking, no showing. Yeah, but it was, we had a very active program committee back in those days. I mean, I think they probably still do. But a lot of people were on it, and they all brought their particular expertise. Like we had a couple of opera people and a couple of dance people and a couple of jazz people, so that the program committee would meet once a month and make recommendations, and then we would pass them on to Dennis, and if Dennis thought they were okay, then he would present it to the board, and the board would vote to have whatever shows we were going to be presenting. It was a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, I think that's a secret to Proctor's success, is the fact that it communicated so well with so many people. I mean, we asked people what they wanted to see, and we were very public about it. So you could send your suggestions, and they would be considered, and I think people really liked that. It made them feel possessive of the theater. And so anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no,
Go
that's
right ahead.
fine. No, that's
So we'll get back to Bob and his tickets. He
Yeah.
apparently got out of the box office after a while.
Oh, right. And then I started working with the bookkeeper, doing bookkeeping, because I had bookkeeping experience. And then I started working on the movies, really putting together a movie schedule. And I just kept doing one thing or another, and then became director of operations.
And that included what duties?
That included working the shows as house manager, and being here for that, and daytime maintenance and housekeeping and all sorts of things that volunteers had been doing. So we started having a staff, a few people, and added shows. More
Right,
shows
right.
were added, and there was money to pay the bills, which was nice.
I think he lived here. He was here. I'd come down and he'd be here in the morning. He'd be here in the afternoon. And I'd come back to a show at night. There would be Bob Warlock.
Okay, so Bob, did you live here?
Well, almost.
He spent a lot of time here.
Yeah.
But this dedication like that from so many different people that made it a success. I mean, people could come and they could see Bob and they could talk to him and know he was going to be there. And if there was a problem, Bob, help, help.
Yeah.
Well, he's a personality that the public even recognizes
Yes.
as
Yes.
Well, when we did the movies, I also sold the tickets. That was before the box office was selling the tickets. I would sell the tickets. I had a machine made that I found. There was a machine here, a ticket machine I had to put into a portable booth so that we could have it at the door when we needed it. And so I would sell the ticket, rip the ticket, and then send them over to the candy counter for
Yes.
popcorn and candy.
And you
Sometimes he was at the candy counter too.
and you ran the candy counters and the
Well, I managed them. I would work them if we didn't have somebody else and somebody else could sell the tickets, because selling the tickets was important. We needed the income from that. And we kept our prices at the candy counter as reasonable as possible and still made a profit. People would say, "Oh, is that all that cost? I'll take two then."
Popcorn
was
especially
priced.
was a
Yes. big
wonderful
seller.
profit maker.
Mhm.
So what's your recipe for popcorn?
Well, basically it was a stick that came packaged, and we would add a little flavoring and make sure that it didn't get popped too long, and have it fresh. Fresh was the important part, and having it pop as people came
Yes.
in.
The smell
The
of
smell
popcorn.
sold it.
smell, right? Yes.
And when did we start selling other things, cards and shirts and in the other shops?
Oh, okay. That was probably in 1982. We had space that became available where the canal was, that canal side entrance, and the bathrooms, the wonderful bathrooms that were here, were torn down, and so I saved the paneling from those. The men's room had mahogany paneling, bird's eye maple, and a few other things. Then the ladies' room had these big white panels with the gold,
Gold leaf on it,
filigree
yeah.
on them. And I had that incorporated into a little shop that became our first gift shop. Then we would have at nighttime for shows a little cart that we would load up and bring up to the theater and park opposite the candy counter. And so we started very simply with Proctors items and a few things that were theater memorabilia of some sort. And then we had volunteers who would staff it during the day, started having it open. And so now it's doing quite well, turning over $80,000 in net profit to the theater at least a year.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because your prices aren't that astronomical.
No, Marty's a good buyer.
I'm a supporter of Proctors. I always have been, and I always will be. So,
you need jewelry or cards or T-shirts, you know where to come.
yes.
Or any theatrical
Oh,
items,
I
lunch boxes.
give people whimsy gifts a lot, and I'll come down and I'll buy a star for their bathroom. It says star on it, or something like that, as a silly gift. It's wonderful.
So you were the program chair for quite a long time, weren't you?
I think 10 or 12 years. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a long time. And as I say, the people who were on the program committee were wonderful people, because they would, they'd have inside news in their particular field, and so they'd say, "This is going to be available. Do you think we could book it?" And they'd provide all the information, and then the committee would talk about it, and with advocates there to talk about it, those things all got incorporated in the schedule. It was fantastic. Yeah.
So for the early years, were they able to kind of do a balanced budget for the first few years?
Yes, we were pretty in the black for a long time, and then all of a sudden we really expanded a little bit quicker than our capacity to to keep up with it. And so we got ourselves in a big hole. And to overcome the debt, we were going to have a dance marathon, which didn't turn out to be a success. And then it was when, you know, the group that of businessmen came in and said, well, we'll help, and they did. They just came and got it back on track, and it's been pretty much on track ever since, I think.
So Marty, did your kids get involved down here?
Oh, please. Whenever I'm involved with anything, my kids are the free labor that I bring. They came
They were
clean.
smaller at that time, of course.
They were smaller. I could control them better. But it was, a lot of families did. I mean, Lomel's brought their children, and the whole
Yeah.
family would come down.
And they both worked at the candy counter, and
Yeah.
then my children worked at the candy counter.
Yes, yeah.
And
So it was-
Philip's children are working here at Proctors, and you
Yes.
know.
It's always been a family operation.
Interesting.
Yes.
Because the appeal is so much greater now, and there is still that loyalty.
Well, as I say, I think it started when we first started, and it's just builds and builds, because people have always had a part. They've always had something they could do to help, and I think that makes them feel just very family oriented to the theater. And so, you know, I'm glad to see that it still goes on. I'm glad to know that Philip's children are working.
I remember one night Marty and I were standing as people were coming into the theater, and she said to me, you know, I don't know everybody coming in now. And that's wonderful.
Yes, when we first opened, we had all gotten all our friends to participate, so you did tend to know people. But it's wonderful that I still come down and see tons of people that I've never seen before. That's great. That's a new audience. That's fantastic. Anyway.
That's good. I just thought of and lost a question in my mind here, so I'll have to come back to it. Can you think of some of the big successes that you had in the early years, the shows that really went over well?
Oh, The Wiz. That was an early show. We booked it on spur of the moment. It became available. I heard about it, and I called Dennis and said, Mary Ann Lamel, I think, was at the time the person that I was checking with. But anyway, we booked The Wiz, and it was a sellout, wildly popular. You can't believe it. We sold it out in a matter of a couple of days.
And that was pretty early on?
Yes, that was,
That must have been 79, 80.
yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
80.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember.
And what type of marketing was done in those days?
Well, Jim Delmonico, who was the head of WRGB, was the board member who took on the marketing role, and he had a large committee. Betty Bricker, Ed B., I can't think of all the people that were on his committee, and they really tried to get free coverage wherever they could, and of course with WRGB, Jim Delmonico could say, mention this on the news, or slip this in on this ad thing here. And that was a great help. And another person who's an unsung hero in my book, but he's a wonderful, wonderful person, was Marvin Friedman.
Oh, Marvin, yes.
He ran the Van Dyke, and he had jazz pianists play at the Van Dyke, and he loved classical music and was a big supporter of the arts. And he used to entertain at a brunch or a lunch the committees. So you had wonderful attendance at your committees. And you know, nobody would miss this wonderful opportunity to have lunch or brunch at the Van Dyke. And he was a great supporter. And he'd think of things. He'd say, well, now this person is going to be doing this, and maybe we could get them to put a line on their flyer. And it was just wonderful. People just wanted to see so badly that they just thought outside of the box.
He probably brought Marion McPartlin here
Oh, yes, he
once
did.
or more.
Absolutely, he did. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Because she was a very close personal friend of his, performed very often at the Van Dyke, and he called her and said, you'll have to come and perform at Proctor's.
Going back to, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
going back to the first show that we had here, you remember the story where they went to the Van Dyke after the show to eat?
Yes.
And it snowed while they were inside, and they couldn't get traction on the car on Union Street, so they took the elephant out of the truck and had the elephant push the truck down Union Street. That was quite
Okay.
exciting.
Now that's a very,
An elephant at work.
yes, elephants are wonderful.
Wonder if the city of Schenectady has thought of this as a general idea. I doubt it. Probably cost too much.
Probably.
Hire an elephant to push your car.
Do you remember any bombs where you just booked something and
Well, we booked some program, it was a musical program, and people were, it was a British program, I think, and I think Irish people were very upset about being Irish. I should remember, but I just don't. But anyway, it caused a great furor, and finally the show was canceled because it was just so problematic.
Wow.
We also had, what'd you say?
Well, we've had a few shows that people were not happy with, but you can't please everyone.
Right.
But I remember there was one show, it was Frankenstein, I believe, that the show was going on, and somehow the stage door wasn't locked, and somebody came on delivering pizza during the middle of the show.
and you
So
heard
that-
that in the back where you were
You
standing?
saw it on
They
the
saw
audience.
they were on the stage.
My goodness.
Yeah. We also had some shows that we had a rock concert. We had a big debate whether we were going to have rock concerts or not. And I don't know how rock it's considered. Charlie Daniels was coming, and that was a consternation for us because we just didn't know how to handle it. And we got advice from all kinds of people, and they said, well, you really should hire your own security guard and be in charge, have them report to you, don't let them report to other people, have the theater be in charge of the security. So we hired an operation called Lame Duck from Poughkeepsie, and I'm sure that was their name.
Bad omen, I think.
Yeah, well, they were fantastic,
Oh, good.
and they were really, they collected, I think it was it 8 or 9 trash barrels full of liquor and beer from people coming in because they.
Like
you
to
couldn't
drink
bring-
with Charlie Daniels.
Oh yes, yes. Well, Charlie Daniels had several cases of liquor delivered to the stage door when he first arrived. That was part of his contract. Yeah. But anyway, that was a big success, and we did have Governor Carey's, one of his children was in the audience, and they decided that they weren't going to. We told them to sit in their seats and stay in their seats so that we could, keep track and protect them because we didn't know what sort of a evening this was going to turn out to be, and they didn't want to stay in their seats. And these people from Lame Duck came over and said, "You'll have to sit in their seats," and they said, "No, they weren't going to." And I can remember going down, and because I was sort of in charge of the security guards, and so I went down and told the governor's child that he had his choice. He could stay in his seat or he could be escorted out. Either one was fine with us. And,
That kind of cleared it up.
it did clear it up, but all I could think of was, egads, I hope I don't ask the governor for any favors.
Maybe the child didn't tell all their stories
Probably
to
not.
their dad.
We also had a Russian company come, and they were afraid that somebody was going to deflect. And
Oh,
so
yes,
they
yes.
had all kinds of guards and
KGB people.
KGB people. It was very exciting.
Mhm,
You know.
Did you see these people around? I mean, how
Oh.
did you know all this?
Well, they were around backstage and around, if anybody from the cast came out, they,
Yeah.
they accompanied
They
them.
would accompany them. There were these
Hmm.
people in dark coats,
Mhm.
You mean just like you see in the movies?
just like you
with
see.
a
in the-
hat slouched down?
They didn't.
Not
They
quite.
didn't have not quite that bad, but they were sort of identifiable, and you could say, "Gee, that person looks like a KGB agent," and
That's a
would turn out to be one.
Cold War thing, because now when the Russian companies come, they want the American currency.
Right, yeah,
So,
yeah, quite different.
things are
but
different.
those were different days, were wonderful days.
Can you think of any more great stories like that?
Well, when we had the British Blue Watch, Black Watch come, there were a lot of problems with the Irish IRA, and so we had bomb threats during that period of time. So we
Oh,
had to
that's
have
right. It did.
dogs come in and search
Sniff
the
the
theater
theater,
and
yeah.
be prepared just in case anything came up.
Yeah.
Were
yeah,
there
I forgot that.
dignitaries that came in the theater to do anything that you recall?
Not too many, other than the performers.
Of course, Hal Holbrook made that wonderful
Yes.
speech
Yeah.
about saving the theater. It was just very, very moving when he came to perform.
How did he do that? Was it after the show? He just
I'm quite sure it was after the show.
Yeah, he came not
out.
knowing what he was getting into, and found the theater charming. He liked the theater very much and liked what people were doing, trying to save the theater. And so he pledged money, personal funds.
Yes, and
he
encouraged
made
the audience. I mean, he gave a very impassioned plea.
You know, I think I remember that, and we were up in the balcony, and people were sitting watching him, because
Yeah.
I made him, I was, I think, mayor at the time, and I made him a patroon.
Yes,
And then we had a picture, there is a picture upstairs, quite near the History Center,
right.
Yes, right
that
next to
was donated by a photographer, and I know I have to get the plaque back on it.
Yes.
Don Jeanette
Yeah,
was a lovely photograph, but it was,
and he's standing in between the seats.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes, that's when we were restoring the seats. Mel Mintz came to a board meeting and was said, you know, I think we should start restoring theater seats, and I'd like to start, and he said, I'd like to have a demonstration seat made so that we could show it to people and charge them for this restoration. And I said, well, how much is it going to, well, the whole board was there and they were all talking about it, and so we asked how much it was going to be. And he said, well, to get it started, it was going to cost $50 to buy this one seat. I happened to have $50 with me. I don't usually carry that much. I usually carry about 10 cents. But I had $50 with me. And so I handed him the $50 and I said, buy the seat, I want to. So supposedly I was supposed to have my name on the first seat, but I don't think I do. I've bought other seats since, and I don't think it's the first seat.
Just so you know, there is a whole file of all the seat
I should go and
owners
look.
and where they are.
Yeah.
So anyone who would be interested in knowing if they had a seat,
Are there still seats to sell?
they are up in the balcony.
Oh, well,
So we're still
Carter-
doing that. It's a wonderful thing.
garner the last row. The last seat up in cloud heaven.
And they're great seats.
Yes, yeah, they are.
So can you think of any other things? These are great stories.
There's probably a whole lot of things.
I
but,
should have made notes. My mind is totally,
yeah.
I can't think of anything else that would be.
Well, what we've heard is wonderful. And, you know, you lived through Dennis and Gloria.
Well,
Don
don't forget
Shane.
Don Shane first before Gloria. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, tell us a little bit about each of their roles. I think it would be interesting.
Well, I knew Gloria very well. I knew her before she came to the theater, but she had a particular wonderful way about putting together a season. She was very good at balancing things and saying this will go with this. Don Shane brought business acumen to the theater. We really needed that. He was very bottom line conscious and very, you know, he sort of set the tone, but he wasn't quite as hands-on. Gloria was much more hands-on.
Well, Don brought Gloria in.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, well,
so-
yes, because of his
Right.
WMHT
Right.
connection with her.
And I don't think Don ever intended
He
to
didn't
stay
No.
here
intend
very
to.
long.
He did it to help, as so many people did so many things to help. He was just going to come, you know, and help for a little while.
And Dennis was the initial person, and
He was very gregarious. He was mayor of Scotia, so he was used to speaking in public. He was very hail fellow well met, and just a really nice person to deal with. He had a little difficulty haggling over prices. He tended to sort of say, well, if that's the price, that's fine. You need a little more haggling to get a more attractive price, and I think Don Shane, as a businessman, was more likely to haggle. not haggle, he'd just say, I'm not paying that price, and can you offer me a better one? And Gloria had that aspect too.
Well, Gloria had also worked at the theater over in
The Round at
yeah,
Colony Center.
Colony.
Yeah,
Mm.
not Colony Center,
Coliseum.
Colony Theater,
Coliseum,
the
yeah.
music theater. And yeah, she brought a lot of contacts. She was able to pick up the phone and call people that she'd booked over there, and they had really top-notch people. And of course, there were other top-notch people that came, and I'm off on another digression. I'm going back to your old topic of people who were famous, because Jim Cushing married Maureen O'Sullivan, and she was very, very fond of Proctor's Theater and just thought it was wonderful.
Well, she's now in our Hall of Fame, so if anyone
Yes.
comes in the building, they'll see a little background on her.
Yes, yes.
Her daughter even came, Mia Farrow.
Mia Farrow, yes, yeah.
Came to some shows.
Well, there have been a lot of famous people here, George Burns,
Oh, yes, yeah,
and
Several times. Red Skelton.
yep.
someone who works here, maybe Alan Bryce was telling me how he took him shopping to Rotterdam Mall. Red Skelton.
Oh,
Red
Red
Skelton,
Skelton,
yeah.
okay,
I
yeah.
thought, well, what an interesting
Yeah.
piece of
Well, we had a
information.
policy when the theater first opened of really trying to make the performers very welcome. We had groups of people who put flowers in the dressing rooms, who would take people shopping or to get their laundry done. And so we got a very wonderful reputation in the industry that you really would enjoy going to Proctor's because they'll treat you so well. We put bowls of fruit in the dressing room and have, it was just
Yeah, and Marvin would bring over some goodies from the Van Dyke.
from the Van Dyke, yeah, so that it established a feeling of welcome that they don't always get. You know, sometimes they just book in and sort of take your chances. But they got really royal treatment when they came to Proctor's. I don't know if we're still doing that. They probably can't do it because you have something going every 20 minutes.
Well, the thing that intrigues me is that very often the artists have requirements in their contract for a certain brand of water,
Oh, yes.
what they want for dinner,
Yep.
and our guys are all going out looking for all this stuff
Yeah.
all the
All the
time
time.
that they
Some of
want.
those are negotiable, but mostly
Yeah.
they want those things as a standard contract.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them.
No.
No, because if you're going every night to a different location, you can't try Joe's Pizza every time. Yeah,
Or the show might not be that good some nights.
that could be.
Well, thank you both for coming and talking to us today, and I think I've learned some new things, so I appreciate that, and we hope that those of you who are watching enjoy this new series sponsored by the Proctor's History Committee, and thank you for watching.